The language section of the CMAT is very, very simple. I think full marks are a definite possibility if your grammar and vocabulary are relatively decent. Yes, I agree, some parts of the paper might have been challenging to read, but ultimately the answers were not that difficult to arrive at. Let's get started with our first question, just to prove my point. Speech without any preparation is known as. So please focus on the word speech, right? We do a lot of things without preparation, but what do we call it when we give a speech without preparing beforehand? In other words, on the spot. The first option says ready-made. See, ready-made means that it is already prepared and manufactured and we don't have to put in any further effort. But this may not necessarily apply to speech. So let's not pick the first option. Natural has multiple meanings. It means not artificial, something that is found in nature, something that is inherent, something I don't really need to put in special effort to do. But we don't really call a speech natural just because we have not prepared for it. So maybe not natural. Present-minded is not really a phrase that we use very frequently. What we do use is the phrase presence of mind. If you have presence of mind, then you're able to react very quickly in a difficult situation. So if we call a person present-minded, what would that really mean? Maybe it means that person has presence of mind, but the more likely meaning is that that person is more focused on the present rather than thinking about the past or the future. Either way, option 3 is not supposed to be our answer. It doesn't describe speech. And finally, we have option 4, which is supposed to be extempore, not extempore, as a lot of us pronounce that word. Extempore specifically means spoken or done without preparation. Now, think about how we would divide this word. Ex kind of means without or out, and temp has to do with time. So this word literally means out of time. So when you are out of time and you still give a speech, it is extempore, and that is why option 4 is our answer. Here we have another easy question. I just hope that you paid attention to the question stem. It says, pick the word opposite in meaning to the word obligatory. So we need to know what obligatory means. I think a lot of us are familiar with this word. It generally means something that you're required to do, either because there's a rule or some sort of a law. So we want something that is not obligatory. The first word here is compulsory, which is more or less a synonym of the word obligatory. It means mandatory, required. So this is not our answer. Exclusionary. See, when you exclude someone or something, you try to keep them out. This has nothing to do with the word obligatory, completely unrelated. Voluntary, this is something that you do because you want to do it. This could be our answer. The last one, exemplary, it means to set an example, to be a model, a paradigm, the ideal. Again, nothing to do with the word obligatory. So our answer will have to be voluntary, which is the opposite or the antonym. Now, we finally have a question on grammar, but it's not very difficult as long as you're familiar with the basic parts of speech. The question is asking us to identify the usage of the word principle in the given sentence. The word principle has been used twice, but it is not used in exactly the same way. In the meeting, the principal stated that the principal reasons for the suggested changes in the statute. So in the first case, we are referring to a person, probably like the principal of a school or a college. So this is most likely to be a noun. But we'll check the definition of a noun as well. Now look at the second principle. Stated the principal reasons for the suggested changes in the statute. Now here principal kind of means the most important reasons. So how do we know how to classify the second principle? A noun is a person, place, animal, thing, or an idea, right? So that way our first principle is probably a noun. Look at the second one, principal reasons. We are describing what kind of reasons. So most likely that is going to be an adjective, because an adjective is a word that tells us more about a noun or a pronoun. But just for the fun of it, let's also talk about verbs and adverbs. See, for most of us, verbs are actions, but verbs are not only actions, they could be states of being as well. And an adverb is kind of like an adjective, except that an adverb tells us more about the verb, an adjective or another adverb. So here we are not concerned with verbs and adverbs. The only things we are concerned with are the noun, which is the first principle, and an adjective, which is the second principle. So option 3 becomes our answer. Now here we have to pick the correct passive form of the sentence. I'm sure that we've done active and passive voice in school, so it is not very difficult. Nevertheless, I do want to go through the basic rules for converting active voice to passive voice. If you feel that this is not necessary, you can maybe just zip through this part and focus on solving the question. You see, when we change from active to passive, or even the other way around, one of the things that happens is that the subject and the object change places. So who is the subject? The subject is nothing but the doer of the action, and the object is the receiver of the action. For example, in this sentence, it says one sees this sort of advertisement everywhere. Who is the doer? One. Now this one can refer to anyone, it's non-specific. The verb is sees, and the object typically comes after the verb. Now probably the object here is this sort of advertisement, right? If I want to convert from active to passive, I will have to bring the object before the verb and put the subject after the verb. So this is the first change we need to make. But there are a few more things that you need to keep in mind. A lot of times we use by to introduce the doer of the action when we convert to passive voice. Although this is not mandatory, because sometimes we don't need to mention the doer because the doer is not essential. So for example, in this case, someone cleaned the room. Again, someone is non-specific, just like one or somebody. So if I want to convert this sentence to passive voice, it will become the room was cleaned. It is implied that it was cleaned by someone, but we don't really care who that someone was. So in this given sentence also, we will first start with this sort of advertisement because that is the object. So look at the first option. This sort of advertisement is seen everywhere. Now what has happened? We have not mentioned who is seeing it. Why have we not mentioned it? Because this person is not important. So option 1 could be our answer. The second one, this sort of advertisement sees everywhere. Now the problem is that the advertisement cannot see anything, so this doesn't make any sense. Third option, the advertisement are seen everywhere. There is a subject-verb mismatch. Advertisement is singular, so we cannot combine it with the verb are. The fourth one, this sort of advertisement is shown everywhere. Again, what we have done is that we have changed the tense. So please keep in mind that when you're converting from active to passive, you should not really change the tense. There's no need to do that. Plus, when you say is shown everywhere, you're also partly changing the meaning, right? Is shown everywhere by whom? So option 4 is not going to be our answer. We go back to option 1, even though we have not mentioned the one who is the one who sees the advertisement, it's still correct because of the last rule that is mentioned here. Now here we have a question on phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs, I understand, can be a little problematic because there are just so many of them. Some of them we are familiar with. Some of them we may have heard but we're not sure of the meaning, and some of them we just have never met, right? So let's try to look at this particular sentence and try and understand what the author might be trying to say here, right? He keeps getting for me and I really don't know what wrong I have done. So when you ask someone what is wrong, what have I done? Probably the other person is indicating that you've done something wrong. So maybe they are annoying you, they're picking on you. I mean, they're definitely doing something negative, right? So when you say he keeps getting for me, the intention is to say he keeps annoying me, upsetting me, something of that sort. Let's look at our options. He keeps gets at me. See, with keeps, we cannot say gets. With keeps, we would probably need an ing word. He keeps doing something. So 1 is not our answer. He keeps get off at me. Again, get off at me is just not a valid phrase. It has no meaning, which means that can't be our answer. He keeps getting at me. This could work, first of all, because it has an ing, which is what we were looking for. And when someone gets at you, they are criticizing you, being mean to you. The negative behavior that we had talked about earlier is being symbolized here. And the last one, getting by me, this is a meaningful phrase, but it has a very different meaning. If someone gets by you, they sneak past you without you noticing. But that's not what we want to say. So our answer is going to be option 3, getting at me, which means that someone is upsetting you or annoying you. Now here we have to pick the correct option to complete the sentence. All we really need to do is to pick the correct form of the verb catch. So here some knowledge of verb tenses is helpful, but honestly it's a very easy question. You don't really need to know all the rules about tenses. He often blank cold in winter. We want to imply that this is something that often happens. It's a regular occurrence, right? So do you remember which tense is used for regular occurrences or habitual things? Usually the simple present tense, right? So here we want to say he often catch cold in winter or catches cold in winter, because these two are in the simple present tense. But we can't say he often catch because there's a subject verb mismatch, right? So let's try catches. He catches is correct because if you remember, in the third person, he, she, it, they, the singular verb ends with s. So we do want catches. So again, please remember, catch, subject verb mismatch. So option 1 does not work. Is catching is present continuous tense. So he's not catching a cold right now. He generally catches a cold. So option 2 is out. 3 is in fact correct. We like this option. He often have caught. See, we can't say he have. Even if we did want to use this, we would have had to say he has. So again, there is a subject verb mismatch, plus there's a tense error also. So our answer ultimately is catches. As I said, very easy question. Just sharing some additional rules with you in case you find them helpful. Now here we have to pick the odd one out from the following options. This question I actually enjoyed quite a bit because it throws a little bit of a challenge at you. You need to not only know the meanings, you also need to figure out how one is different from the rest. Now here, if you decided to guess, I don't blame you, but let's take a look at the meanings of these phrasal verbs. See, when you hold back, normally it means that you're preventing yourself or someone else from doing something. So for example, you could say, I really wanted to punch him, but I held myself back. I restrained myself. The second one, hold high. If you hold someone high, then you have a lot of admiration or respect for them. So this is a positive thing. Hold on. This I think is a very common expression. When you tell someone to hold on, you mean don't let go, have patience, wait. Then hold up. What's the hold up? It means what's the delay? Why is it not moving ahead? Now, if you look at all of these meanings, you would realize that most of them involve not doing something or preventing something from happening, whereas one of them has nothing to do with this theme. So our answer is going to be hold high because it has nothing to do with waiting or stopping. Now let's take a look at this particular question. I know it looks like a lot to read, but actually it's a very simple question. You simply need to focus on the blank that they're asking you to focus on. So this is nothing but a closed paragraph with 3 blanks, but look at the question here. Pick the appropriate replacement for 3, which means that we have to focus on this particular blank here. And I think it can be done without necessarily reading the whole paragraph. Now, if I read from the beginning, because it's just safe to do that. To what extent reasoning can blank a reliable basis for a theory of justice is of course itself an issue that has been subject to controversy. Honestly, when I start reading it, it sounds too complicated to me. So I would just focus on the third blank and see if I can get to the answer. Just before the third blank, I'm saying first chapter of this book is blank with the role and reach of reasoning. So I'm trying to say that the chapter is related to the role and reach of reasoning, right? So the expression is related to. Now, keeping that in mind, let's look at our options here. Can I say is concerned with? With is, we can't use the word concern. Why? Because we want to describe the chapter. In order to describe the chapter, we have to use what we call the past participle of the verb. I know it sounds very fancy, but the past participle is something we use all the time. So for example, the past participle of keep is kept, right? The past participle of concern is concerned. Now, when I say the first chapter of this book is concerned with, it means it's related to. Now, please notice, even when we say is related to, we're actually using the past tense, right? So a lot of times the past participle is used as an adjective or a description for something. Now, concern therefore is eliminated because it cannot be used as a description. Concerns cannot be combined with is. The first chapter of this book is concerns with. Same problem, honestly. We can't really use the verb forms here because we need something that can serve as an adjective. Then we have is concerned with, which anyway I hinted at earlier. When we say is concerned with, it means it is related to or it deals with. So that's fine. And concerning, when you say this is concerning, normally it means that there is a problem, and that's definitely not what we want to say. So our answer is going to be option 3, concerned. As I said, the paragraph is slightly challenging, but the question is very easy. Now let's take a look at the first blank. Again, the paragraph is the same, so we don't have to worry about it. What I would really want to focus on is what is there before the blank. To what extent reasoning can blank a reliable basis for a theory of justice is. I have admitted that the paragraph is complicated, but this question is very, very easy. Let's take a look at this particular word here, yes? Can. So when we say can, it's a modal, it's a helping verb, right? Try thinking of all the other combinations with can. I can do this, I can see this, I can go there. What is happening? We have used the base form of the verb, right? We don't say, I can done it. That doesn't work. So if I know that with can I need to use the basic verb, then my answer is very, very clear. Let's take a look at our options. Can I use provide? Yes, can provide a reliable basis. Provide is the basic form of the verb, so that's going to work. Provides, not the basic form. So when I say base form, it means do not add an S, do not add an ing, do not add a D, nothing is to be added, just the basic verb. So provides is out, provided is out, not the base form. Be provided, definitely out, not the base form. So our answer is obviously going to be option 1, because remember, a modal is going to be combined with the base verb. Now let's take a look at this very, very simple question from the same paragraph. All that has changed is our options and the blank that we're supposed to focus on. So now we're looking at blank 2. Look at what comes after the blank. First chapter of this book. We're referring to a specific chapter, right? So amongst all the articles, which is the one that we use when we refer to something very specific? We will have to say the first chapter. That's all there is to this question. So 1, a and an, these are cancelled out because these are indefinite articles. We could have said a chapter of the book. We could have said an apple, but we cannot say a first chapter because the first chapter is the first chapter. It's a specific one, which means that our answer is going to be option 3. Very simple question. Now here we have a fun question. Why is it fun? Because it looks a little scary. But on the whole, I don't think it's very, very difficult. You just have to think of examples. So when you have this sort of a statement question and they ask you which of these statements are true, think about whether there is an example that can prove or disprove the rule. That's really all you need to do. Now, the first statement here says, dare usually forms negatives and questions like an ordinary verb and is followed by an infinitive with to. Think about it. Can I say dare to do something? Of course, I can think of so many expressions. Dare to dream, dare to listen, dare to challenge yourself, right? So in this case, I have used dare as a regular verb. Now, this is going to be true most of the time. When it says dare usually forms negatives and questions like an ordinary verb, I have a question right here for you. Does he dare to challenge them? It's a question. He doesn't dare to speak up. In this case, I'm using dare in a slightly negative sense. And if you notice, when I use it as a regular verb, I am following it up with a to. So the first statement is definitely true. Now let's take a look at the second statement. It can also be used like a modal verb, especially in present negative forms, and is followed by an infinitive without to. Now what is a modal verb? It's a helping verb. It's not a main verb, right? So can I use dare in that way? And then I should not be using to after it. Let's take a look at a few examples. Dare can function as a modal verb. For example, I dare not speak. Here I would not say I dare not to speak. It is I dare not speak. I dare not see. I dare not do something. In this case, speak is my main verb. Dare is my helping verb or the modal. So my second rule is also true. Now look at the options. I would have to say both statement 1 and 2 are true, and so our answer is going to be option 1. For those of you who like vocabulary and have worked hard at it, this question should be simple. But if you have not worked at your vocabulary, then yes, I think this might be a bit of a challenge, although guesswork might have helped you out. So it's asking you for the synonyms of the word cajole. I love this word because it reminds me of someone I know, not personally, but in the movies. So I think you know whom I'm hinting at. The word cajole normally means to try to convince someone to do something in a very nice, sweet, gentle way, usually through flattery. So sometimes, if when you were a child and someone had to get you to take medicine, they might have tried to cajole you. It's not very bitter, it's very sweet, you're such a brave child, you're such a brave girl, that's cajoling you. Now, I need synonyms for this. Look at the first word, coax. See, the word coax kind of means similar to cajoling. When you're coaxing someone, you're gently trying to get them to do something. Maybe to study, maybe to help you out. So for example, if you have to coax a friend to accompany you to a movie, you'll say, you know what, the movie is not going to be fun without you. You're coaxing them. Entice. Entice is to try and tempt someone to do something. So again, you're persuading someone to do something in a very nice, sweet, gentle way. So A and B are in fact very similar to cajole because you're convincing someone using very gentle methods. Now, C is very, very different. I'm sure you know what bullying is, right? It means to scare someone or even force them to do something. Not a nice thing to do. Disenchant. Disenchant is a completely unrelated word. It means to free someone from an illusion or from false beliefs. For example, some of us might have grown up with certain very rosy beliefs about the world, and when you grow up, you might have been disenchanted. Those false beliefs came crashing down. Please forgive my cynicism here. But disenchant has nothing to do with the word cajole. So my answer would have to be A and B, which is why option 1 is the choice. Here we have everyone's favorite question, the parajumble, but thankfully we have options. And this parajumble is super easy. You don't even need to solve the entire thing. What we're going to do is, since there are options, we're going to start by taking a very quick look at the options. Why? Because it tells me what the starter is. So there are 3 options that start with C, 1 option that starts with B. So do I really need to consider any other sentence as a starter? No, because the options are telling me. Let's look at A. We know for sure that A is not the starter. Why? Because that's not a choice. I will look at B and C. Look at B. India is facing a water situation that is significantly worse than any that previous generations had faced. It's introducing the topic. It's a pretty broad sentence. So I would say, yes, this could definitely be the starter. Now, C. That's why interstate disputes over river waters are becoming intense and widespread. When I say that's why, I should have mentioned the reason earlier. This cannot be my starter. This, in fact, is the result of the dire water situation, right? So I know that B is definitely my starter, and I know that C is definitely a follower. So as you can see, if you look at the options, I get my answer straight away. But just to take a look at the paragraph as a whole and the logical structure, we start by introducing the problem. Then we add more details to it. So for example, look at 1. This is telling us one of the reasons for why we have this situation. All the water bodies are polluted. Then not a single Indian city can provide clean water. So this is further adding to the details of the dire water situation. And because this is the scenario, that is why there are so many disputes over river water. So this becomes my conclusive sentence. But you don't actually need to put in so much work. You just need to check which is your starter and which is your follower. That's it. And you will get your answer, which is option 4, B, A, D, C. Now this is a sentence arrangement question, very, very easy. But if you want to be very fast at it, what you should ideally do is remember that most sentences in English have a specific structure. Subject followed by verb. Yes, this does not happen 100% of the time, but very commonly. So if I think, what is the subject? The subject is a person or an animal, some sort of a doer, right? In this case, the person seems to be the Indian government. So most likely, I'm going to start with C. The second part is verb. Verb is an action or a state of being. So the Indian government is something or the Indian government is doing something. So as you can see, had to plan for, this is where the action comes in. So that means that I will start with C followed by B. The moment I know that, I can quickly get to my answer. I don't actually have to try out all the sequences. So I start with C, which narrows it down to options 3 and 4. After that, I know that B has to follow, which clearly tells me that option 4 is the answer. Now, after that, you just need to check whether the rest of it makes sense. The Indian government had to plan for balanced economic growth and development of a huge country. CBAD. So now I can confirm definitely option 4. But as I said, very quick question. You can simply figure out the first two parts and get to the answer. Now in this question, you have to match the columns, but it's not very difficult because all you have to do is to try and figure out at least 2 combinations and you'll get to the answer. Let's take a look at our first option. Win hands down. You're winning, right? So something good is happening. If I look at list 2, which one stands out as positive? To run away, not so much because you're probably running away from something bad. Conquer easily. This could work. If you conquer something easily, then you're winning. So most likely A should be combined with 2, but let's take a look at the remaining. Learn from bad experiences, but they're bad experiences, right? So not entirely positive. Miserable, definitely negative. So I would say that on the whole, A should be combined with 2. So no problem here. Now, if A is combined with 2, then I can cancel out at least a few options. Option 1 is gone, and of course, option 4 is gone. I still have 2 and 3 left. Look at B. Learn the hard way. You are learning, but with difficulty. So most likely, I am talking about learning from bad experiences. So B should be combined with 3. Now look at the 2 remaining options that I have. B cannot be combined with 1. So I cancel out option 2. It will have to be option 3. So I already know my answer, right? But look at C, to feel blue. See, blue a lot of times is associated with the ocean, calmness, and so on. But when you're feeling blue, you're feeling sad. Please learn this expression if you don't know this because it's very, very common. Take to one's heel. If you take to one's heel, you are running away. You're using your feet to get away from a situation, right? So D has to be combined with 1. Now again, you don't need to know all of them. Honestly, I would not know the last one unless I actually studied it. It's not an expression we use every day. Our answer will have to be option 3. As you saw, option elimination helps. Now here, we have a set of slightly legal sounding terms and we have to match the columns. In case you are not familiar with these expressions, which are mostly Latin, you can guess. Even if you're familiar with some of the word roots, I think it's possible to solve this question. Of course, some expressions are just very, very common, so you should just know them. For example, the first one, alibi. I'm sure if you have read any crime thrillers, you know what an alibi is, right? An alibi is someone or some evidence that says, this person was with me and therefore this person did not commit the crime, right? So alibi is proof that the defendant or the accused was elsewhere. The problem is, I don't know what to match alibi with. So even though I know the meaning, I would kind of hold off. Ex parte. Ex normally means out or without, and parte has to do with party, not the party that we enjoy, the party which is the other side of the transaction. So this is an expression you may not know. Now that we have to study it, it is when you take a legal action or you do something without the other party being present or the other people being present. So this, not so sure. See, however, lex loci, this word loci or locus, this usually has to do with location. So if you know this, then you know that this has something to do with place. So if nothing else, if I were just guessing, I would say, you know what, C definitely should be matched with 3, if nothing else. And D, the most common expression, quid pro quo. So when we say quid pro quo, normally it means something in exchange for something else, right? Normally, we would use this in everyday transactions. You tell your friend, you know what, I can do this for you, but it must be quid pro quo, which means you have to do something for me. So this you don't really need to learn. This is something that is fairly common. You've probably heard it. The ones you do need to learn, however, are these 2 in the middle. So make sure that you commit these to memory. Of course, the answer obviously is, if I match C to 3, if I look at my options, That cancels out the first one and the fourth one. Quid pro quo obviously is this for that, which means that I have to match D to 1. Now look at these two options. 2 cannot be my answer, so my answer is going to be option 3. Fairly simple. As I said, I don't really encourage guessing, but in this case you can play around with the word roots and you can get to the answer. Let's take a look at this assertion reason question. Looks scary, but actually is fairly simple. See, whenever there's an assertion reason question, it makes a claim, which is an assertion, and the reason is supposed to provide supporting information or an explanation for why that claim is true. The first thing you need to do is to assess whether the assertion and reason are in fact correct or true. If they are both correct and true, you can happily cancel out the last two options. A is true but R is false, or A is false but R is true. Right? Both are correct, which means that now we're limited to the first two options. If you find that both are correct, then you have to do another level of analysis. You have to check whether the reason in fact provides a good supporting point for the assertion. Does it explain why A is true? If it does explain, then you can pick option 1. If it does not explain because it's slightly irrelevant to the claim, then you will pick 2. Both are true, but the reason is not relevant to the claim is what you are saying. Now, we will follow the same process. We will check whether assertion and reason are in fact true. But before that, we need to look at the sentence here. The details of the incident was not known. Now, the moment you read this, something should strike you as wrong. I'm not sure if you see it yet. The details of the incident was not known. We have a subject-verb agreement issue, right? Let's take a look at our assertion. The above sentence does not adhere to the requirement of subject-verb agreement, and hence it is a grammatically incorrect sentence. It does not really match. Why does it not match? That is what the reason is supposed to explain to us. So I know that A is true because yes, there is a subject-verb mismatch. I have a plural subject and I have a singular verb, right? The reason is in noun plus preposition plus noun constructions. Let's pause here. Noun plus preposition plus noun. In this sentence, what is my first noun? This. So this is my noun 1. What is the preposition? Of. What is the second noun? Incident. So this is my noun 2. So in such constructions, the verb agrees with the number and person of the noun preceding the preposition, which means that was is supposed to actually align with this noun, the first one. The rule is ignore the prepositional phrase, focus on the noun before the preposition. That's all that the reason is telling us. So the reason is true and it does provide an explanation for the assertion, which means that my answer is going to be option 1. Now in this question, we are given 2 statements and we have to decide whether one of the statements is true or whether both the statements are true, right? So it's fairly simple. Usually, these kinds of questions have to do with grammar. The first statement says, modal verbs have only one form. They have no ing or ed forms and do not add s to the third person singular form. Let's say I don't understand all of this sentence, which honestly in a hurry I may not. Let's focus on only the first part. Modal verbs have only one form. Do we know what modal verbs are? Yes, modal verbs are nothing but auxiliary or helping verbs in a way. I am going to use these terms interchangeably because I want to keep grammar light. They are helping verbs and not the main verb. So why do we use it? We use them to convey things like necessity, obligation, possibility. So we're talking about those words such as can, may, and so on, right? Do we say they have only one form? Well, in some cases, yes, that's true. Can, could change to could, but then usually that is for very different reasons. May, could change to might, will, may change to would, but they don't have multiple forms just like a regular verb does, right? Now, after these words, we typically have another main verb, which is why I'm calling these helping verbs. So as far as I can see, modal verbs do have only one form. As you can see, there is no ing or ed form. So all these examples prove that this rule is true. And do not add s to the third person singular form. Now try using a main verb. I can do this. I can see this. Are we adding an s to the main verb? Not really. Most of the times, I would say something like, I can go there. Now, even if I change the subject, they can go there. You see, I'm not adding anything to the main verb, right? So my rule here is in fact true. Now let's take a look at statement 2. Modal verbs are followed by past participle form of the other verbs. Past participle forms. Take a look at these examples. After can, have we used anything in the past? No. Go is not the past participle. The past participle of go would be gone. So we know that the second rule in fact is not true. Usually modals are followed by the base form of the verb, the basic verb. So first statement is true, the second statement is false. Let's take a look at our options. Both statement 1 and 2 are true? No, they're not. Both statement 1 and 2 are false? No, they're not. Statement 1 is true, but statement 2 is false. This is what we were looking for, which means option 3 is my answer. So yes, slightly heavy on the grammar side, but not as complicated as it appears at the beginning. So for such questions, my advice is try to think of examples to prove or disprove each point. Now, thankfully, there was only one RC passage and there are 2 questions associated with it. I would, however, say that the passage is not easy to read, language-wise or topic-wise either. The good part is that you don't have to understand everything. There are only 2 questions and I think the questions are fairly simple. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to highlight the key points in the passage and I will also tell you where I'm deriving these points from. It's not that I am not reading, I am reading, but you have to pause and say, okay, this information is important and this one maybe not as much. It starts off by saying that education makes the man, which means education shapes us. It's very important. So we know that mostly we are going to be talking about education. After that, it says that one method of education, therefore, would produce only one kind of man. Now think about it. If all of us had exactly the same type of education, would we not be a little more similar to each other? Sometimes it seems like it's a good idea, but the author says that it's not. Why not? But the greater excellence of human nature, so I'm looking at line number 3 here, the greater excellence of human nature consists in the variety of which it is capable. So as humans, if we want to achieve our potential, then we need to be varied. Otherwise, I don't know what will happen because the author doesn't tell us. But the author is definitely promoting a variety in terms of education. Okay? Now, as we keep reading, it talks about how uniform and fixed systems of education will keep us always the same. And the author is saying, you know, that's not a very desirable thing. Look at the Spartans and the Athenians. So the Athenians and the Spartans have been used as examples. And the author is saying, the varied character of the Athenians was certainly preferable to the uniform character of the Spartans. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Sparta and Athens, but on the whole, the Athens were slightly nicer people. Spartans were a little more warlike. And the author is saying, you know, we don't want to be Sparta, we want to be Athens. And therefore, we need variety in education. As I keep reading, I will then say, okay, all of a sudden, we are starting to compare ourselves with animals, brutes, as the author calls them. So I would pause at this particular word here, but it is. But it is the glory of human nature that the operations of reason, through variable and by no means infallible, are capable of infinite improvement. I would probably want to read this line one more time. We're trying to say that we have reason. We are logical creatures. They are capable of infinite improvement, even though they're not very great to begin with necessarily. They are not infallible. They are variable. They are changeable. But the good part is we can keep working on it and get better. And how do we do that? Going back to the same point. Look at what the author says earlier. We come into the world worse provided than any of the brutes. Brutes are the non-human creatures. See, when animals are born into the world, they are actually far better equipped to survive as compared to humans. So we have less when we are born. But we are still better in one way. According to the author, animals their faculties reach a certain potential and then they plateau. Beyond that, there is really not much more that they can do. But humans, we can keep growing and deriving enjoyment from multiple things. That is what the last few lines are. But when their faculties are at a full stand, there refers to the animals, they have reached a maximum, but we can perpetually derive happiness from new sources. So we can keep improving and growing. Now, how do we do that? Varied education. So our main points are that education shapes us and it should focus on variety rather than uniformity. And the second point is that humans are born with fewer abilities, but we are capable of growing and developing our intellectual faculties and deriving happiness from multiple sources. If you have understood this much, life is simple. Let's take a look at our first question, right? Now, I hope you did look at the options here. So it's not just A, B, C, D. It is A and B, A and C, A and D, and so on. We will work with the options, but let's take a look at our statements first. The author creates a binary between uniformity and diversity in matters of education. When you create a binary, what that really means is that you are distinguishing between or saying that these are two different things, which the author is in fact doing. If you look at the text, one method of education would produce one kind of man, but if we want human excellence, then instead of uniformity and fixed systems of education, we need variety. We need to give free scope to everything. So yes, the author is creating a distinction between uniformity in education and variety in education. So I would say A definitely should be a part of my answer. B says it upholds a uniform and stable system of education. Upholds means that it says that that is the right way to go. But the author is not saying that. The author is saying uniformity is not good. So while I want A, I don't want B. The author is making an argument against uniformity. It holds uniformity rather brutish but necessary for society. The author is saying variety is necessary for society, right? So obviously, it cannot be B or C. Uniformity is the characteristic of brute creation. Uniformity is something that is there in animals, non-human creatures. And the author is saying, let's be a little different, we're better, right? So it cannot be C. Now, D says, it holds diversity in education a key to human excellence and progress. That is exactly what has been stated here. The greater excellence of human nature consists in variety. So, D also has to be part of my answer, which means that my answer will have to be A and D only because we don't want B and C. As I said, you don't have to understand everything, but yes, you did need to understand the main argument that the author was making. Education needs to promote variety. Why? Because that makes us better than animals and also because it makes us better humans. We have one more question to go. Which of the following is true about the given passage, right? This is kind of like a primary purpose or a main idea sort of a question. So let's take a look at our main points right here. We know that the passage talks about education, how variety is important, how it is important to achieving human excellence. This is my shadow answer. The first option says, it describes the state of education in our society. You see, the passage is not describing how education is. The passage is talking about how education should be. So not one. The second one, it narrates the story of educational development, definitely not narrating any stories. So not two. It reflects on the role and impact of education. Yes, it does. Education shapes people. That is the role. What is the impact? It will help us develop our abilities and find different ways to enjoy life, right? So that is role and impact of education in life. Obviously, option 4 cannot be our answer. So it is option 3. As I said, slightly challenging passage, but very easy questions. So all in all, I think this CMAT paper, at least the language section, was very, very simple. I think with a little bit of work, one could have done excellently. I think the most that I would probably allow myself to miss would be 1 or 2 questions, not more than that.